Welcome back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And we're doing something a little different today. Actually, we're going to be doing something a little different for a couple of episodes at least, maybe longer. A while ago, this is actually funny because this is kind of a spin-off of like a funny comment made who knows how long ago, where Ford talked about how much he enjoys reading books. I suggested maybe he should have his only books channel, like a paid subscription, just Ford reading books. People can like and subscribe if they want to do more of that. We could set that up.
We can set that up.
Yeah, for sure. But anyways, something that we haven't done for a while as a group, but did some of going back 5-6 years, was we would occasionally...
It's been 10 years now. You didn't do it 9.
No.
Because we know it. Yeah, the first book, 9.
Oh, the first book. Yeah, but we haven't done it in probably 5 or 6 years.
We haven't done it post-COVID.
Yeah. So...
COVID's 5 years.
But we would occasionally, as a group, read a book.
Yes.
And something that usually Ford thought was meaningful, insightful, potentially timely to whatever it was that we might have been going through in the moment. And then we kind of like figure out how we apply the things and what they mean to us as an organization. But it sort of brought up some like reminiscent time of when we sat down. We've talked about it a couple of times, to sort of our first strategic planning meeting. And in preparation for that, we read a book.
Yeah.
Right?
2016. On the beginning of it is that, like, reading is learning, and we're always trying to be better leaders and better, people to work around. And so, way back in 2015, 16 range, I think the actual first meeting was at the end of 2016.
Yeah.
And, some of the stats from back then, I think we were just under $7 million in revenue as a company, and had about 25 people total on the team, including everybody. So that's where we were at that point. And the three of us and Luke took a Saturday morning with Nina and went over some stuff. And like, it's just crazy because there's certain things in that we'll, talk about later that like actually came out of that at that time when we were doing it, I thought we had lost our bloody brains. Like there was like carbon monoxide in the building or something, because it was like stuff we were writing on the wall. It was like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah. But, we were able to get to some of those points. But we thought that, like, for you guys out there in the field or when you're driving or whatever, we're going to kind of go through the book a little bit at a time and kind of talk about it, because, hey, you can follow along maybe if you're interested, if you want to read the book, but maybe this is like a Cliff Note version of the book for everybody, because we can read it and talk about it again. And the other part is reading it again this many, what you said, 9 years later, like maybe it means different things to us. Maybe it reinforces some things that we thought back then, but it kind of just, it was one of the first books that we all read together. And I think it found some stuff that some of it we might still use today, even if we're not like calling it based off of what it was then. Yeah,
I totally agree. When you and I started talking about this idea, I had to like really dig for the title of the book. I remembered the book and the premise of it. I remember doing it, but I couldn't remember the title. And
remember the author?
The author, certainly a lot of the details. And then as we kind of were like going back and forth over it a little bit, I sort of started to remember some additional components and things like that. But I think that, have you guys started to reread the book?
I didn't yet. I started like looking at some of the old notes because just kind of reminded myself. Like I remembered, like you said, I remember specific things about the book. I remember specific like action items in it, but the name and the title and stuff had fogged out of my brain.
So when Ford reached out to me about it, and I think part of the reason he may have called me was because I have all the books that we've read. Yeah. Behind me on my desk.
That's what I said. I was like, Dan has a copy. I can see it in my head.
So I knew the colors of it.
He called me, and I was going through, and I was reading the introduction to each book, trying to like trigger my memory on which book we were talking about.
Okay.
And as I was doing it, and we're on the phone, you must have called him, or I don't know, or Ford figured it out.
Yeah.
And so I pulled the book at that point. As soon as he said it, I was like, that's right, it is that book. I hadn't made it to that book yet. And And I looked at it. What I actually did was I didn't start reading the book, but I looked at, the agenda for that day and the notes following the day and the second meeting we had and like some emails leading up to it and some other stuff. And in one of them, I think the initial invitation to come, it said, most of the answers to the 4 questions Ford's going to ask is on page 32, 33.
32 and 33, yeah.
So I immediately went to 32 and 33 because that's my style. I want to test. I'm going to read the questions and then go read the book.
I literally tabbed it as soon as I found that on my notes soon. I was like, oh, let me put a tab there.
It's in my truck. Mine is also
the
tabbed
answers.
on that
We're
page.
good.
Yeah, I don't need to read the book. I only needed 32 and 33 per Ford.
That's so funny.
So we both did the same thing. Yeah. So I looked at that and then but looking at the notes from that day, it is kind of crazy because it puts us where I was at that point, where we were as a company, as individuals, in our family lives, and then how quickly that growth happened over the next 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and continued right up into COVID. And then COVID had an impact, and then a couple other things have altered how we do things, but. I definitely think it is relevant. I just looked at those 2 pages and I was like, yeah, I remember this. And this is funny. The other thing that happened, which has some relevance to this, is this tied to the 1-page document we used to make the plan on what we would set as our goals. Right. And I don't want to get into it. If Ford wants to talk about which one it is, he can. But what's really ironic is I met somebody and they were talking about it and they mentioned the same system. I completely forgot it was what we did until I looked it up. And then they said the trigger word rocks, right? Like you remember we said to get our rocks done. And
12 hours before the
12 hours before the next meeting, we would have to make sure we did those things. And when I looked at it, I was like, wait a minute, we already did this once. And I didn't realize when they were describing it that it was the same thing we had already done.
So I don't think so. We did we used that sheet. I don't think we did.
But we didn't actually do the
actual system.
Yep. EOS.
Yeah.
Now it's called EOS. Back then it was the
Rockefeller.
Rockefeller
Habits no, that's not it. What was it? It was
it was something like that.
I thought it was Rockefeller or something. Whatever it was. I thought that sheet said Rockefeller on it.
You might not be able to. They probably changed the name just current conditions.
Yeah, you're not allowed to say that. Yeah,
say Rockefeller.
Don't want to give credit to the wrong people. But yeah, I think it was something along those lines. Yeah. We never actually did that system, but we used that form,
that framework.
Yeah, the framework for meeting setup and discussion points and goal setting.
I mean, it is when you look back, we've talked about it often that what you measure and what you set goals, that you can achieve them. It comes easier. And I mean, in that point, Ford, you said we were what size were we? At that point?
7,025,000 people.
Yeah.
7 million. And I mean, and we basically, in my mind, and Brian, you just mentioned the numbers, but in my mind, we doubled and then doubled. Basically, we doubled and then almost doubled and then went up again. And it was in 4 years, we had grown significantly, changed sort of completely of who we were and how we run in terms of numbers and size. And then that's when we really had to, sort of figure it out again, because we grew into a different thing and had to figure out how do you be that animal,
Right. Yeah.
So, well, and I think it's so poignant too, because, we just went through some challenging times and it's time to restart the process again, refresh the process, not start it again, but refresh it, because all right, it's time to get going again. It's time to get back to what we were, as we've talked about in previous podcasts. So this kind of feels like a spot. I mean, the baseline is going to be different doing it in 2025 than when we did it in 2016, but I still think the principles and how we did it will work. It's just going to be a different starting point than when we started the last time.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I feel like just with everything, and I think it's like a work thing, a worldly thing, whatever it might be, circumstantially, it just feels like it's hard to kind of get your heads over the water right now. Yeah. And so when you brought this up at first, I was like, oh man, I don't know, read a book, which I usually really enjoy. But making the time for it just seems like a task. But as we started kind of talking through the why we did that originally and the result of it, and I think it could be really healthy. I think it's
a refocus basically. Is kind of the
timing
point.
Couldn't be better, right? So Dan, you said it, we grew violently for us, for for who we were when that started, compared to who we became at the end of it, like the experience curve that we had to go through was pretty phenomenal, I think. And like it just like timing wise, it was really interesting to look back at, because we grew really violently in like 2 spurts, like you mentioned. And we felt like we had gotten to a point, not where we were going to stop, but had like figured out who we were, who we wanted to be, and could find like consistent, incremental, continued growth. And then COVID happened. Mm-hmm. And we certainly don't blame the result of the last few years on COVID, but it did sort of feel like, okay, we got through that, we can readjust. Then we had, some project makeup come along that we took because of COVID to like make sure that we had what we thought would be good, reliable, consistent work. The problem turns out it wasn't necessarily things that we were good at or at the time we're prepared to do. And now, like, a couple of years later, 4 going on 5 years later, like we are sort of getting back to what we think we should be, what we think we should be doing, what we think we should look like. And it's like perfect timing. I mean, and it sucks in some ways that we had to like learn the lesson again. It's not the same lesson. It's different lessons, but it just, it's like perfect timing.
Well, and Dan was going to say something, but I was thinking about it. Like when we were that size at that point, we had no systems.
No,
we had nothing. You had just been a year or 2 joining us at most.
A year.
You maybe had 2.5 years with us. I mean, it was by the seat of our pants at all and every day. And now that's why I think the best part is for us starting here is that we have put a lot of those things in place so that now as we go forward, we're still implementing them today. We're still working on some of them, but safety-based things, training things, reporting systems, all that kind of stuff that has been put in over these past couple of years. It's kind of funny because you put them in after you actually needed them, but now that baseline is ready to go and it's ready to fire up the engines again.
Yeah. What really makes me struggle with it over the last, 5 years, is you look at it and you want to say like, the funny part is COVID did not slow us down that much. Like
minus that like 8 weeks where you had to stay home.
Right. Like the actual shutdown impacted us less than it impacted a lot of other companies, I think.
More than some, but certainly less than others.
Fallout of the decision making that occurred based on our trying to grasp what was going to happen in an unknown time was catastrophically worse than actual COVID for us. And so it's been something we really couldn't get out of the way of because that's the nature of this business, right? Like on the one hand, we always say we don't want jobs that turn over too quickly because starting and stopping a job is hard. But you can only have so many problems in something that starts and stops quickly. At least you're out of it.
Sure.
Versus we always wanted longer jobs. And in that window, we were looking for the longest jobs we could get because we didn't know what was going to happen, which was actually the worst thing we could have done because there was too much change in that period. Mm-hmm. And what really is sort of amazing to think about is that process piece. Is we were at that point, it was just bigger, faster. It was just, from 16 to 19 or 20, it was just go do the next thing faster, not speed faster, but I'm using faster as like just an adjective. You know what I mean? We wanted to be bigger. We wanted to do a larger job. We wanted to have more equipment, more people, more work, more crews, more. It was just more, be bigger than we were the day before. And
we're supposed to be better, not bigger.
And we're supposed to be better. Right. And that's sort of what I was getting at. We didn't lose our way of being better because we weren't trying. But like I look back to it and Luke is really like almost like, I don't want to say a Northern Star, but like Luke is so consistent. And Luke started to see that before me, that like, hey, yes, this is amazing, but are you better? Or is this growing a little faster? And we weren't ready to hear that yet. You know what I mean? With the personalities that were the makeup of the three of us, we weren't as a group ready to hear like, hey, let's yes, there's all these opportunities. And I think at times you tried to make an effort to say it, you know, but it just, we weren't ready to hear it as a group. You know what I mean? The three of us couldn't agree that it was too much. You know what I mean? And we had probably me pushing and Ford looking and saying like, the opportunity's there, let's take it. And you trying to say like, are you sure this is a good idea? And giving us good reason why it wasn't, but we weren't ready. And the sad part is I feel like had it not been for one mistake that was a rock for me for very long, I think we could have learned much less pain. But it's the thing that when we read this book, it is going to strike me that I managed to ignore one of the key pieces of this book, which is that you have to like do the next right thing, that you have to if you identify a weakness or a threat, you need to address it. And you need to realize that not addressing that weakness or threat is more dangerous than than the actual threat. You know what I mean? Like than the loss of it. And that really is the strongest lesson that came out of this whole thing for me personally, professionally, but I mean like for me individually was I will not make the mistake again to say that I can't do something because the impact of doing it will be too injurious. Like that can't be true. Like it has to be that I look at it and say that if that is the right decision, we will have to learn how to adjust and make that decision to protect the company and do the right thing. And then figure out how to put the pieces around it, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel like going into the book, that's what I'm going to see. It's going to be right in my face that we wrote it down. We said we had to address it and we didn't address it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
You know, and we won't get into it because it's just not, I don't think in the book we'll get into the specifics of it, but
yeah, no.
But from a systemic standpoint, like that is true. And then the idea, and Brian, you and I have talked about this, we are so much better than we were at the point where statistically, numerically, margin-wise, we were better in every way on paper then, but we're much better now. But it's frustrating because we got to get to where we got to refresh. We got to like pick our heads up, go back to work and get out in front of ourselves again and do the things that made us able to grow. But now with these new systems in place and the people and the guidance and the guardrails and all these things that are going to allow us to grow for the next 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. Did we say the name of the book yet?
I don't believe we brought it in, but no, it's funny when you actually texted it to me because you found it, like the way it's written, like the name, like I'm like, what is he saying? And then I realized it was the book name,
the
right?
title of the book.
Yeah, because I was like,
what?
This is a weird text. But Right Away and All at Once.
Right Away and All at Once, yeah.
Is the name. Yeah. And the gentleman that wrote it ran multiple companies. I remember the generator company for some reason in it. That was one that stuck in my brain. But a buddy of mine, Showalter, who runs a landscaping company, his father-in-law was a friend with the guy. He's like, hey, you want to read this book? And as we've mentioned here before, I do read a few books in a year. So I read it, and it just still
read the books.
I think last year was like 78 books.
Yeah, that's unbelievable.
Yeah,
I actually love that you know the number.
Yeah. Well, only because my Apple, like
most of them are digital, so it's telling you.
I'm all digital now because that's the only way I can read books.
Yeah, but
because
I feel like you say that, but that's not true. Like I remember that I did 142 workouts last year.
Right.
I mean, yes, when I work out, it will tell me how many I did, but I know it because it's something that I'm measuring. Yeah. Right. You know it because you are measuring it. Not that you're comparing. You're not. I mean, how many books did you read the year before?
I don't know, 65 or something.
You know what I mean? Like it doesn't tell you that right now. I mean, you can look at it, but you're not. It's because exactly what the book's like. What you measure is what you remember. It's that you value, that.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's tough too because with the small ones, they're all on my phone because I can pick it up for a few moments here, a few moments there. That's not the way I like to read books, but that's just nature of the beast.
Sure.
But one thing for this year that I got to get back into is last year, just because I didn't do as many educational books. Right. There was a lot more just kind of like
Amelia Bedelia.
Yeah, well, I'm not even counting those. If we start counting how many books I read, I can jump.
Seuss.
I could jump that number by a little bit more, but no, I just I wasn't. I bought a couple of them and like I started reading them and I just couldn't quite power through them the way I used to.
Sure.
So I read a lot of other type of things, but that's why like this one going back to it, it's like okay, it's been long enough time that like it's worth just refreshing the memory on some of the stuff. And something might make more changes to us, might not, but we're doing a lot of cool things here to start of 2025 with some different things. And so it's like, okay, this was, I'm not saying we're going to like catch the same lightning in a bottle, but I think that this book was very beneficial to us as a team in 2016. So I think it's a good place to start because we tried other books that like just didn't like, there's plenty of stuff out there in LinkedIn world or wherever where it's like, oh, you got to read these books. And like some of them honestly suck. Like they just, they're supposed to be the books you read, but like you start reading through them and like after a while you're just like, this guy just wants to hear himself speak or like whatever it is. Like, I mean, there's one real famous one that everyone's like, oh, you got to read this book. And like, I know a guy who like basically runs his company based off of that book, but I tried to read it and it just didn't click for me. It just didn't like, I got like 2/3 through. I think I gave it to you guys and you both said the same thing. You're like,
I think I know what you're talking about.
Like it's just,
and like I wanted to love it.
Right. Like everything about the whole like build up behind
the bravado, the personality, the history. I wanted to love it. And the book was just like, I don't know.
I can't get anything out of this. Yeah. So I mean, because you have to take each, because every book you read comes from a very specific point of view. And I think the benefit is grabbing them the best you can and maybe picking a little piece of each one to create your own point of view. Because, if you jump down this, this expert with quotation marks route, you could follow them off of, a bridge over here or the other way. So it's trying to guide them all together and create your own mosaic because just one way isn't really going to get you there.
Well, I don't know. I individually don't know that. I have trouble separating if any of the books I've read weren't books Ford said you should read this, right? Like, because I feel like it's not true, but like, did we read Atomic Habits?
You and I read that.
You and I read, but it wasn't Ford.
I don't think so.
Because that's one sort of where Ford's saying that, like, I read it and it was impactful. Like, and I think that it was ironic to me that it was impactful to both of us because I felt like it was impactful to me because of how I operate. That it gave me like a mechanism to try and control myself and say like, let's be more intentional. Whereas you're very intentional. So I was like, Brian might like this. I took it that you would almost like it from the standpoint of this makes sense.
Yeah. I think I recommended it to you.
Did you recommend it to me? Like,
so.
I don't know which way it went, but
I think I started reading it.
Brian read like 7 pages and he was like, yeah, this all makes sense. Dan needs this. He didn't read me further. He just handed me.
No, I did. I read the whole thing. I thought it was really good. Cause I've developed some habits that I formed while reading that book because of like trying to be more intentional about
triggers.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I think I might have been reading that like at the beach or something like that. Okay. And thought it was a good one. So, but that's fair. I think along those like same lines, like Ford, you said you maybe haven't read as many like leadership type or like professional development books, and I would say that's definitely true of myself as well. I think some
as
of
you said about like getting above the water, like you just needed. I think we all needed just like an out.
That's exactly what
I'm not going to claim that as it, because I think about like we were all, we're still doing peer groups, but we were all in some professional development before at different levels, and with travel issues and everything else, and just the bustle of life, they kind of fell off to the, they just became less important to us than at that point they were.
Well, surviving became like the focus.
Well, I was going to say not even less important because I think it's hard. I knew like the continuous improvement, professional development, always like trying to be better the next day. Like you like to say a lot, Dan, than we were today or yesterday. I think like at its heart, I always held that to be true and important and still do like, but I think I just needed something less serious and like, just everything that as a group and individually we've been experiencing over the last, 2, 3, 5 years. Yeah. I just like, I needed something that like, I needed something in a weird way, like mindless. Like, I just didn't want to have to like overly.
You're turning on TBS and watching the same movie again.
And I mean, Brian, you and I talked about this too. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we did.
And how it impacts us personally and choices we make and things we do. And it's definitely just true. It's ironic. Yeah. And I was actually talking to my sister at one point, and I was saying that we were talking about something completely different with family. And I was saying, like, everybody says like you have to just like deal with things and you have to like learn from them. But sometimes it's hard to learn from something when the thing is still happening. Like it's always easier to look at things in the rearview mirror. And the reality of the last 5 years for everyone, like that's the reality. The reality is that most of the people, it's what's creating the feelings that people have right now and the stress levels and everything else, that most of the people have been dealing with a lot over the last 5 years since COVID, as the world adjusted. And, just there was so many changes and dynamics in how people acted and what belief systems were and everything else, that I feel like people they want to break. You know what I mean? They just want to break and they want to step away and just try and gather themselves. But that's hard to do while it's still coming at you.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think it's key, I think Ford said it about just get out of, not even get your head above water, just get out of the water. Just, I'm not gonna do this right now. You know what I mean? Like I'm just gonna separate myself and I'm gonna try and get a clear head and move on. But that's hard when every day you just got to keep swimming.
Yeah. Well, so we'll go back even further because it ties to this. So I used to be part of a professional development group, and when I first started it, it was 1 day a month, and I mean at that point, was it just before you guys came on board?
Yeah, I was going to talk about this. It's funny you're bringing this up,
right? And at that point, like, everything ran through me. And I was like, to take a day off a month and go sit in some classroom, like, sounds ridiculous. Like, I feel too important, or I'm too needed to do that. Mm-hmm. And, I'm no longer part of the group, and I learned some valuable things while I was there, met some lovely people. But just taking that day and doing that, it was amazing what, other people had to make their choices, or whatever the situation was, what that created. And I think that's kind of where we are now, again, is where we're just going to have to take that time, because if we don't, our days will get filled up. There's no problem with that.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just like, we're going to have to like make the choices to forcefully do the things we need to do to be able to not be in the grind, because we now have, a lot of people we're responsible to. And, it's the only way we continue to grow and get better is by doing that kind of stuff. And, it's very easy for it to drop off or to not happen, or, schedules don't work out, so things don't happen. But it's just amazing how, like, when you start doing it, you're like, this is crazy. Because I was talking to someone about, they were starting another group up. And I said, really, the people that need it the most are the people that are not going to be willing to take the time necessary.
Well, and so the funny part is what I was going to talk about with that group is that, like, growth doesn't happen slowly necessarily. Like, so you were in that group, what, maybe 5-7 years?
4 or 5 years. Yeah.
Okay. And in 4 or 5 years, just based on where we are as generationally, right? That you had baby boomers, who had worked all those years and became very good at what they did. They had reached the highest levels that they were going to reach. And in my feeling, you entered that group and there was a lot of people there who you were like, I have to learn everything I can from these people as fast as I can, because they were very intelligent. They were experienced. They were older. You respected them. And I felt like within 5 years, there was this transition that just preceded COVID, where all of a sudden Ford went from being the one sitting in the room with a notebook to the one that people were saying, hey, what do you think? And at that point, you almost need to find a new group, which is hard to say, because the people in that group needed a new group, right? Because they were telling you all the answers, but we always need answers.
Sure.
We always still have questions. And so it's funny to me, because that's what I took from that group, was how quickly Ford went from being, a really sharp entrepreneur to a really sharp entrepreneur that was experienced and trusted, and everybody wanted to see what he thought. And at that point, then what do you do? Then who do you talk to say, hey, I don't want to give you all the answers, not because I don't want to, not in a tribal sense, but because I still have questions. You know what I mean? And I didn't have nearly the level of growth that he did, but I felt the same thing. It went from this point where, Steve was trying to explain to me very basic things, and I was just trying to figure it out, to people asking me my opinion and wanting input. And I was like, okay, well, I can give you, and I remember saying to them, like, I can give you what my opinion is, but I don't know that it's any more than my opinion. And I don't know that, you know what I mean? I almost felt like saying at times, I give Brian my opinion and he says, that's a terrible idea. So I don't know why you want it. Brian and I work together and he says he shouldn't listen to what I say, so, and I don't know if you feel that same way, that same, and how fast that growth happened. And then a real fast reality check of, okay, you're not that smart. You know what I mean? Like, you made a bunch of mistakes and now we're going to have to figure them out.
A buddy of mine, Matt Bechtel, he actually has a friend, and this guy is a professional grouper. So what he does is he goes in, will not stay at any group for more than 1 year, rips out everything he can out of that group, and then moves on. But the other side to that is there's a trust level built during that time. Like, I understand his theory, but I don't know that I truly agree with it, because I'm still in touch with some of those people today that I haven't seen or haven't been with that group for years, but like, there's a trust level built and things of that nature.
Right.
But it's just funny that's the guy's, that was his MO. He's like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get to what I need out of them. And then after a while, like, there's nothing new that can be gained out of that group of people. So how do you keep leveling up?
I'm like such a slow adopter to a lot of this type of right. So, for a long time, you encouraged me like, hey, find the group that makes sense for you. Like, start getting involved in something. It's beneficial. And I always sort of drug my feet, and I was involved in a group for probably 3 or 4 years, and part of it, I think, is my personality. The trust factor is important to me. Like, I won't just start talking to anybody because they're friendly or they're there or whatever it might be. But I've experienced similar things, not as frequently, probably because of my my hesitancy to like be open and forthcoming to people, and when it comes to like those details sometimes. But
you learn to talk a lot, without saying anything. That's easy to play. You can smile and nod, but
listen, I was easy way. Brian, I met Tom and had lunch with Tom. I had to really go over some things that I wanted his opinion on, wanted his input, and I wanted to make sure he would buy in to what we were thinking about. And he was talking about you, and he said he was going back to you playing checkers. And he said, and Ford used to play checkers, and he would let you take every one of his front pieces, and he'd keep his back wall. And you couldn't win the game. He simply wouldn't move the pieces that would allow you to take any of them. So it was just going to be a stalemate until basically you got frustrated, and he said, and he made a few other references to that style of how Ford operates. And he said, we always played a lot of board games. My family plays a lot of board games. It isn't me. Erin likes to do it. She buys a lot of games that are really fun, that are engaging. And I would not think I would play them because I don't like to sit still, but they are enjoyable. But Tom hit the nail on the head. It shows you people's, their personality and their traits and how they're going to play the game. And he was talking about, he played with a lot of board games, and one of the people, not one of your siblings, somebody else, I think it was one of his cousins or something. And he said, and the guy's only thing was to make sure everybody else got as few points as they possibly could. He wouldn't even necessarily win the game, but he would destroy what you were trying to do just so that you couldn't do it, like just an obstructionist. And he said, versus like Ford playing a defensive style. And then he was talking about Colt, who he always says is more like, Colt and I are more similar. Colt was like coming out of the gates. He was like blazing, like, I'm going to go take out every one of your people. And then all of a sudden Colt looks down and he doesn't have any people left. And Ford's got the whole back line. He's like, how did that happen? I got all your people. And like, you weren't paying attention. You played a very short game there against Ford, and I think it's relevant here as Ford talks about like going into these meetings and not talking and listening and taking it in, that it's so funny personality wise, what you get out of it. Even I remember when, the peer group that we're going to go to in a couple of weeks. Yeah. And I remember, that literally came up as a rough idea when I was aggravated in Arizona. Like, I was aggravated at a meeting and posed this idea, and a couple people like sort of liked it. And then we were later in another meeting, and it was, I don't know what bar we were at, but we were in Nashville, and it was an upstairs bar, and I posed it to Rosso to.
It was Dylan or Sean.
It was both. Yeah. Dylan and Sean were there.
Yeah.
And honestly, probably the only time I have ever been in a restaurant or bar with both of them. It was one time, and I just like you said, I was comfortable.
I think I was there.
You were there. Yeah. And I just decided like, I'm going to take a shot here and say like, I think this is a good idea. Would you do it? Knowing I had like one already I had one person who thought it was a good idea, and I just, as my personality would, let's go. But it's because of the trust factor. Like I developed trust pretty quickly with a wild guess based on what I feel versus you working into it, but regardless, we're both in that peer group. And it's been one of the most beneficial ones for me because it lets me see that we're not the only ones going through things. Mm-hmm. It lets me bounce ideas off of people. It lets me call somebody out of the blue. Some people who are much more experienced as me and some people who are just as experienced as me. I don't know if there's anybody less experienced than me, Ford, but it's there's nothing more beneficial than that. And that's sort of one of the things that really came out of that book is there's a lot of smart people walking around.
Right.
And they don't necessarily have a 40-page plan on how to get something done, but they got a 1-page plan that they're going to rinse and repeat, and it's going to work over and over again. And it's going to turn into, it's going to turn into something that's really successful.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're getting back to the book real quickly. I think one of the benefits to it as we go through it is it had a 1-page plan.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This was started with no plan. There's no business plan. So like, all right, I can tolerate a page. You get me to 40 pages and we're done. Like, that's not going to work. But it's like, okay, I can tolerate, like, if we can put it all on 8.5 by 11, we can stick with that because it's
visible.
It's
right?
visible. It's not, you're not like going to page 42. You just like, let's pop it and go.
And Ford, that is so, there are ways we are different and there's ways we are similar, Ford and I. And that's when, today I was putting together a quick bid today before I came here for a job. And I don't bid as much anymore, but I'll dabble and when I see something fun and that I think I can get quick. And Ford, I spent probably 15 minutes at the end restructuring the bid proposal sheet because I wanted it on one sheet.
Mm.
Like I knew I could fit it on one sheet, but it was on like one sheet and 7 lines. And I was like, I don't like this. We got to keep getting this back. So I'm like adjusting different things to shift it. Purely, I don't know why it had to be one sheet, but in my mind, like if it's
font
one
size 2.
Well, I didn't change any font sizes and I didn't want small print, like
it's
looking
unreadable,
like
but it all fits on one page.
But it was, I just fit it. I was just like deleting some headings and subheadings, but it was that exact thing. It was, if this is on one page, we already talked about it. In principle, they agreed to it. It's how your mind works. And that's sort of how what really rung true with me with this book was they didn't overcomplicate it. It was really simple what the book said. It wasn't easy to do. It wasn't, it was a lot of work. Mm. It required a lot of follow-up, but it was pretty simple. And it's the part I struggled with when we actually tried to roll out, that sheet. The sheet was, I think, 4 pages. And it had like all these rocks, and the rocks had your rocks and my rocks. And I got to do this one in 3 weeks, and this one is. And now I look back and I'm like, God, if I would have just followed this thing, like it had all these answers that I ignored because we just focused on doing what we do. Sort of speaking to Ford's, if you don't make time to step back and go be in a meeting, have some space to think, clear your head, you're going to make worse decisions. You're going to miss things, So it is important that you make the time to be able to think clearly and walk into it with a plan, and that's in this group, that's me saying it, who plans the least, you know what I mean? And maybe I'm undermining myself because you say I actually plan a fair amount, but I just want freedom, but it's important. And, everybody needs to get back to it. And hopefully we read the book and get something out of it like we did the first time and can express it to the guys. And maybe we do a good enough job that somebody wants to pick up a book and read it, or maybe we can give them a good enough version of the Cliff Notes that they can utilize it and benefit from it.
Yeah, I think so. I said to Ford, we might have to watch here. We might end up with, a dozen or 2 people that want to do a book club. So
the book club.
I referenced another guy that I met through a group who actually does run a book club for his organization now. Because it's something that like he talked to a few people about, and they were like, this is interesting. I want to do this. So yeah. So I don't know. We're going to have to get some more microphones at some point.
I got 2 books.
I'm glad they have this one. They're all them.
Yeah. So that's a good place, I think, to wrap it up. So a long time ago, we read a book. And we're going to read it again. And
we're going to talk about it with you.
Like it or not.
You're going to hear about
That's what we're going to talk about. So thanks for joining us today, folks. We hope you got something from this, and we hope you come back.